Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donohue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donohue, and my co-host in Creepitude, as always, is my ride or die, Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. You guys, you've been showing up in droves, telling all your friends to listen to the show, leaving reviews, joining our Patreon page. You guys, thank you so much. This is it's season 4. It's episode 10. It's the season finale of season 4.
And the most dramatic rose ceremony yet. I didn't know it was our season finale.
It is indeed episode 10. That's how we do it. So you guys, once again, thank you so very much. We had new patrons this week. They're Cassandra, Emily, and Tim. Thank you guys so much for signing up for our Patreon page.
Yes, thank you. A man signed up, huh? A gentleman.
We got a dude fan.
Oh my God, dude fan! Woo! Hey, now we have like 2. No, I'm kidding. I know there's other men listening. I'm just teasing. We also have a really great Facebook group. Mm-hmm. If you go to like What a Creep podcast group is right.
Yep.
And that's how you find us. And it's very active. And we have just asked to join. And really our only rule is don't be a creep. Mm-hmm. And you can be a member. And we give little hints about what episodes are coming, and other people kind of share like creepy things that happen to them, or we just share news stories throughout the week. So please join. It's fun.
Absolutely. And you can join Patreon. You just go to patreon.com, look for What a Creep podcast. And we offer bonus episodes where Sonia and I have a couple of drinks and we get real salty and spill the tea.
Very salty.
Very salty. We also have a newsletter that goes out and also just helps to cover the costs of putting on the show. And speaking of that, Sonia and I were just talking off the air. We've mentioned before about merch. Are you guys interested in merch? And if so, what would you buy that would have What a Creep on it, or Don't Be a Creep, or Non-Creep, whatever it is? Let us know.
Not a creep.
Not a creep. Anything. Exactly. Is it a cozy? Is it a water bottle? What is it that you're interested in? Because we will definitely.
A tote bag? How about a tote bag like NPR?
Well, in New York, we're not allowed to have plastic bags anymore. I think it's the same in California, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So a tote bag might be handy.
I have a million tote bags, and I would totally buy one that said Not a Creep on it, or What a Creep even. Actually, I'm just going to make one for myself. So if you guys want some, let me know.
And also, you've been showing up in iTunes, Apple Podcasts, leaving reviews. We just got another 5-star review from Schurz, who just said, so glad I found this podcast. She found us through Trashy Divorces. Sonia and I love the Trashy Divorces podcast. You guys should check that out if you ever get a chance. And I think I've talked about everything. If you're not familiar with the show, what happens is Sonia and I get together every week and we take turns telling a story. Today I'm going to be telling a story about a creep, and Sonia chimes in as she does so hilariously well.
Oh, thank you.
And then at the very end, we talk about someone who's not a creep. You don't hear the neighbors, do you?
Nope.
Okay, you guys, I'm sorry. I've got really loud neighbors, and occasionally it's catty-cornered to my apartment. There is an apartment filled with people, and the young boys and the old women are the loudest fucking people you will hear in your life.
Yeah, everyone, in case you guys don't know, Margot is in Brooklyn and I'm in San Francisco, and we just have very different noise disturbances, let me say.
Sonia has pets. She has dogs.
I have pets and like garbage trucks and people doing yard work, and Margot has loud neighbors and sirens.
So we'll all just buckle up and hang out together, just so you know. But we appreciate you being here. And Sonia, are you ready for our creep this week?
I am ready.
So I'm going to try to do the theme song. Did I do it well? I don't know.
You did. It sound at first I was like, "Oh, Addams Family," but But then I was like, no, I remember. We're not talking about the Addams Family.
No, we are talking about Alfred Hitchcock. He is one of the most famous directors in all of film history. And we're talking about him today because we will say this, he is one of the most talented people who ever put films together. Some of my favorite movies of all time are Alfred Hitchcock films. Some of the favorite movies that I've watched dozens of times are Hitchcock films. He is, of course, brilliant, but he also was something of a creep. And that's just what our show is about. And we decided to take a break from child molesters and murderers.
That's something I thought I would never say. Like, hey, maybe we could cut back on the talking about rapists and child molesters. What do you think?
Let's just go for an old school Hollywood creep. People like it when we do that. So that's what we're talking about today. And my sources are The Telegraph, Alfred Hitchcock, Sadistic Prankster. The Guardian, Tippi Hedren, Alfred Hitchcock sexually assaulted me. The Independent, Obsession, The Dark Side of Alfred Hitchcock. Fascinate.com, 42 creepy things about Alfred Hitchcock. Yahoo.com, Alfred
Only
Hitchcock.
42, huh?
Yahoo.com, Alfred Hitchcock's creepy infatuation with his leading ladies. There's, of course, the Wikipedia page, and there's a few books. Alfred Hitchcock, A Life in Darkness and Light by Patrick McGilligan. Alfred Hitchcock by Peter Ackroyd, and then The Dark Side of Genius by Donald Spoto. And I also want to give a shout out to a podcast called Behind the Bastards. It's a really good podcast. They kind of do what we do, but they're much more political, and they usually have 2 or 3 episodes devoted to one subject, where you and I are sort of a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they did, I think, a 2-part episode of this last year. You should definitely check it out if you want to learn a little bit more about Alfred Hitchcock. So, Sonia, are you ready?
I am, and I wanted you to know that in preparation for this episode, I didn't watch any of the movie biographies about Alfred Hitchcock.
They're not very good.
Okay, it sounds like I made the right choice.
Yeah, they're not very good, you guys. And I like the people who are in them, but maybe we'll talk about it later. But
okay.
Sir Alfred Hitchcock, born August 13th, 1899. He lived till April 1980. He is known as the master of suspense. He has directed over 50 movies. He also was the creator of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which was a TV anthology series. He's been nominated for over 40 Oscars. He earned the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award. He is the creator of what is known now as Hitchcockian style of directing. That's very heavy on visuals, camera tricks, voyeurism. Brian De Palma is a big fan of that technique, and which was also became known as the male gaze. Since his death in 1980, his celebrity still lives on. And like I said, Alfred Hitchcock Presents is constantly on TV. And his films like Psycho, The Birds, North by Northwest, Rear Window, they're always playing on TCM. We will never not have Alfred Hitchcock as part of the culture.
Fact.
So
we have an Alfred Hitchcock box set sitting on our shelf over here with all kinds of really great movies.
Let me say this over and over again. He is a great director, and he was a fantastic storyteller and a very interesting personality. So we will give him his props. We always do.
Yes.
All right. But over the years, stories about his creepiness have been passed around, and especially when it came to his treatment of actors. So let's begin at the beginning. Alfred Hitchcock was born, like I said, August 13th, 1899, or 1999 in my notes. No, he's long dead. He was born in the apartment over his parents' grocery store. He was the youngest of 3 kids, and you will be shocked to hear that he was a very shy, awkward, fat kid who had a hard time fitting in with his peers.
That is very surprising.
When you see pictures of him, especially when he's young, he just always looks 50. It's just he's one of those kids that has a man's head on him. And they said that he would look at people with a strange grin and not say very many words when he met people. So he was always sort of being a little bit off-putting. Story he has told dozens of times over the years. And by the way, he was a brilliant raconteur. He was always being interviewed because he was very witty and quick. But he said when he was 5 years old, for some reason, his father sent him to the local police station with a note that said he was a naughty boy. So the policeman told him he needed to be dealt with, and they locked him in a jail cell for a few minutes. This gave him a lifelong fear of cops. And he had said that he never learned to drive because he was afraid of being pulled over. And in his movies, there are many scenes with scary policemen, especially in Psych. There's a very famous scene with that. I don't know. But once again, we have to take this all with a grain of salt. He was he tended to spin tales. Let's just say
he's a storyteller.
There you go.
Yeah.
He went to several different grammar schools growing up. One was in particular was the Stamford Hill Tottenham School. These are all these very British things. And it was a Jesuit grammar school. And in it, he was taught by a priest who used to use hard rubber canes to beat anybody who broke the rules that day. And you would get a certain number of lashes from the cane. And it was always at the very end of the day you would find out whether or not you were going to get a beating. Jesus. And he said this is when he understood that suspense and dread were just as debilitative as dealing with something scary in the moment.
That's a shitty way to learn that lesson.
I know.
Good Lord.
My parents went to Catholic school. My dad has all kinds of stories about scary nuns.
Oh my gosh.
And rulers, yeah. Hitch's parents, they tried to call him Fred, but he wasn't having it. He hated that name. And he actually went by the name Cocky for a while as a young lad.
That's better than Fred, in his opinion. Okay. All right.
Hitch later on became a nickname for him. So here's a creepy story about a young Cocky when he went to St. Ignatius Primary School in Preston. For one thing, he was known for stealing eggs from the priests. They had, chickens and stuff. He would steal the eggs and then throw them at their windows of their residence. And when they would come out and question him about it, he goes, "Oh, it must have been the birds flying over." He was a very strange kid.
He's very strange.
Anyway, this is a true story. One day, a fellow student, a 9-year-old boy named Robert Gould, said Cocky and a friend of his yanked him from his peers and dragged him down into the boiler room when the priests weren't looking. They tied his hands together. They tied his feet together. They then pulled his pants down, and all he could hear was the sound of scratching and then the two boys running away upstairs. Then, all of a sudden, he heard the sound of gunfire, so he thought he was being shot. It turns out the boys had lit some firecrackers that were pinned to his underwear. And he screamed for help, and it took a long time for somebody to find him. He was rescued, but he never told on who did it to him because he was afraid of their recrimination. This man, Mr. Gould, he later became a priest and worked with prisons, and he claims to have never seen an Alfred Hitchcock film. I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't either. And seriously, what the fuck? What kind of prank is that?
He is a prankster, okay? And he thinks some things are really hilarious when they're just sadistic.
Yeah, that does not sound hilarious. That sounds
horrifying. Cocky was not a nice kid.
Mm-mm.
What
do you expect? His name is Cocky.
When Albert was 15, his father had passed away at the age of 52 to kidney disease. And like I said, he was the youngest. Yeah. So the older boys were already working. So Albert had to actually go to night school, and he had to get a day job to help support his mother. And he had a very intense relationship with his mother. I think that's not going to be a shock to people.
Mm-mm.
She was very imperious. She was a little cold. She was a woman that was always immaculately dressed and very, very proper, but not very affectionate.
That sounds like me. I am also that kind of mother.
She's nothing like that, you guys. She's an awesome mom. During World War I, he was deemed unfit to serve in the British Army. He was always very heavy. And but he stayed in London to be a cadet, taking part in weekend drills, which he really enjoyed. His first jobs as an adult were in advertising, where he created artwork and wrote copy. And it turns out he was really, really good at it. And he would spend all of his time, writing things and coming up with different ideas. And he had a gift for publicity and public relations. And he got promoted very quickly. And then on the weekends, he would spend his time going to the movies. One day he heard that Universal was opening up a film office in London. And in 1919 this was. So he drew some title cards. This is the silent picture era. He drew up a bunch of title cards and went over, and he got hired at Islington Studios. And it was a young emerging art form, and he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. He also very talented, extremely hardworking. He would work all hours of the day, like no job too big or too small. He was very popular. While he was there, he learned everything from editing to art direction, writing, camera work, everything. Later, he worked for Gainsborough Pictures, and that's where he met a woman named Alma Reville. She was an editor and a script girl. At the time, he thought she was kind of cute, and but he wouldn't speak to her because they were on the same level job-wise, professionally. It wasn't until he got he was an assistant director that he actually would talk to her, but they became very close right away. He wasn't, this is going to be a shock, he wasn't known as a ladies' man.
What?
He was extremely awkward around women, and with Alma there was no difference, but she kind of liked him. They kind of complemented each other. Excuse me. She seemed to get him. In the 1920s, he's making movies, and he's working his way to be the director of a story called The Lodger, the story of the London fog, and it's his first serial killer movie. In 26, he marries Alma, and they had their daughter in 1928, Patricia. Throughout their marriage, they were seen as a team. Alma wrote or co-wrote many of his films. She served as his eyes and ears on the set, and she helped oversee editing. He was the star in the relationship, but he appreciated how important she was to his overall success. Also, they mainly just had a platonic relationship. They were like roommates. They rarely had sex, and they slept in twin beds.
Well, everybody did back then, right? That's what the movies tell. It's so weird. If you watch old movies, all the couples, they always sleep in separate beds.
That's because the Hays Code, right?
Yeah, it's not because people actually did that. It's because of the Hays Code.
It was a big deal for the Brady Bunch, which I think started in 1969 or 1970, when they actually showed a toilet in a bathroom.
Yes.
People didn't
so
know they
weird.
had that. What?
It's so weird. Anyway, sidetrack. But
anyway, so here we are in the 1930s, and he's gaining popularity in the UK and also in the US. There's the movie The Man Who Knew Too Much and The 39 Steps, which is an excellent movie. And this is where he began his fascination with blonde leading ladies. For The 39 Steps, that woman would be Madeleine Carroll. He was also becoming notorious for his love of pranks. Once again, they ranged from innocent to clever, and then also just to downright weird and sadistic. So here's an example. He once invited people over to his home for a dinner party, and he had all of the food dyed blue. All of the food dyed blue. Just to get a reaction from people. He did not offer any non-blue food.
Just no reason? Just, yeah, sure, blue.
He loved to get a reaction from people. He loved to see them uncomfortable. He became an expert on telling stories. So when he was ever riding, they say here in a lift, when in an elevator, whenever he was riding in an elevator, he could time his joke so that just as he's about to leave the elevator and shut the doors, it was just before he could tell the joke. He did that to people all the time. He slipped whoopee cushions under his couches.
Yeah. Okay.
He had a horse delivered to Gerald du Maurier's dressing room just to see how he would handle the situation.
That's okay.
The actress Elsie Randolph, she once confided him. You're never supposed to tell him what you're afraid of, by the way, because he would use it against you. She told him she had an intense fear of fire. And one day on the set, she went into a little photo booth, and he locked the door behind her and then had a technician pump smoke into the phone booth just to freak her out. Not to film it, by the way, just as a practical joke.
That's fucked up.
Yeah.
That's not okay. That's terrible.
Yeah. Well, he also, there was one of his people that worked for him, one of his friends said that they were really excited because they had a home that was all electric now. And this is like in the 20s or 30s. And they lived out in the countryside. So that was unusual. And Hitch thought it was hilarious. He sent them over 2 tons of coal. Like,
weirdo.
He said, well, here we go. So here's a really weird story. And this is from Donald Spotto's book, The Dark Side of Genius. Hitchcock bet a film's property man a week's salary that he would be too frightened to spend a whole night chained to a camera in a deserted and darkened studio. This is the chap heartily agreed to the wager. I didn't write that. And at the end of the assigned day, Hitchcock himself clasped the handcuffs and pocketed the key. but not before he offered a generous beaker of brandy to better ensure a quick and deep sleep. The man thanked him for his thoughtfulness and drank the brandy, and everyone left. When they arrived on the set the next morning, they found the poor man angry, weeping, exhausted, and humiliated. Hitchcock had laced the brandy with the strongest available laxative, and the victim had unavoidably soiled himself with a wide area around his feet and the camera.
That's terrible. Oh my God. Ha ha. I made you shit your pants. Ha ha. That's so mean. Oh my God.
He was sadistic. He had a real sadistic side to him.
What a creep.
Yeah. So here we go into the 1930s, and he's beginning his Hollywood career with David O. Selznick. And Selznick loved creative people, but he drove Hitchcock crazy because, first of all, Selznick was always running out of money and Hitch always needed money. And also he wanted more creative control over the projects, and Hitchcock didn't like anybody to have any control over his projects. In 1940, he released Rebecca, and he was nominated for Best Director. It's a fantastic movie, by the way.
Yes.
Other films of the 1940s are Suspicion, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Shadow of a Doubt, Saboteur, and Lifeboat. I mean, these are all just classic films.
Yeah. Shadow of a Doubt is
Fantastic.
really, really great.
When World War II broke out, many directors in Hollywood joined the cause by filming propaganda films for the Army, Navy, and Air Force and Marines. In 1945, Hitchcock worked on a film that showed the liberation of a Nazi concentration camp. It was considered so upsetting that it was not shown until 1985, and it deeply affected him. By the mid-40s, he's known as the master of suspense and an innovator of themes and images. However, many of his actors felt he treated them as cattle, and he literally did just treat them as cattle. Quite a few were offended by his hands-off approach, including Gregory Peck, Joan Fontaine, Jimmy Stewart, and Raymond Burr. In the 50s, he's hitting a high streak and a winning streak. He's got Rear Window, Strangers on a Train, Vertigo, To Catch a Thief, North by Northwest, and Dial M for Murder.
Like, he has such an amazing filmography. I mean, all of those movies.
Unreal. They're all great.
Yeah, all of them.
All of them are worth seeing. Hitch had the bright idea of hosting an anthology series for TV. TV was just taking off. They thought it would be a fad, but he knew better than that. And he knew he could make money if he branded it. And so he created Alfred Hitchcock Presents. This is 4 years, before there's a Twilight Zone. Many people advised him against it, but he knew television was going to be huge, and that was a good deal of his income. And like I said, they still play those episodes to this day.
Yeah. Did you watch the one that they redid in the 80s?
Yeah, I've seen them all. Like, I've seen all of the iterations of that, and Night Gallery and Twilight Zone. Like, whenever anybody does something, some version of that, I usually check it out.
Yeah. I watched one of his Alfred Hitchcock Presents they did in the 80s. They kept the original beginning with him, like, introducing it or whatever, and then they kind of, like, redid these different stories. And there's one that is so messed up. I still think about it all the time, about a woman who's, like, paralyzed, but they think she's dead. Have you seen that one?
No, who was in it? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I'll have to look it up when we're done recording.
Yeah.
And all she could do is like move her finger, and she's like tapping her finger like crazy, and they're getting ready to like do the autopsy and shit. And I'm like, bah! It's like nightmare fuel. Just saying. You're welcome, everybody, for that imagery. Now you will also live with that.
Well, this raised his star power. He introduced every show by saying, "Good evening." And he would introduce the subject. And then his thing also was that he made jibes and jabs at the advertiser every week. And at first the advertisers were pissed off because he was making fun of them. But then they did better with their audience because people thought they had a sense of humor. So even though they didn't really have that much of a sense of humor about themselves, they still saw an increase in sales and stuff like that for their products. So that just all became a part of Alfred Hitchcock. He was raising his own profile. He was becoming as famous as his movie stars. At this point can choose whoever he wants to work for, and he has a string of blonde actresses who he would become infatuated with, including Grace Kelly, Marlene Dietrich, Janet Leigh, Eva Marie Saint, Kim Novak, and Vera Miles. Let's talk about Vera Miles. In 1957, she signed a contract with Hitchcock and was set to star in Vertigo with Jimmy Stewart. Vera didn't really want movie fame, but she felt pressured to sign an exclusive contract. With Hitchcock, he had a crush on her. And when you had a contract with him, it was for 5 to 7 years. And it was a decent salary, but you could not work for anybody else. He had you, right?
That's crazy. So not a contract with a studio.
No, with him.
Like, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So they were getting ready to shoot Vertigo with Jimmy Stewart. They had to push it back because he was always having health issues, and he had to have some surgery. I believe it was gallbladder surgery, and they had to push the shoot several months back. Turns out Vera Miles became pregnant and then had to drop out of the part. This infuriated him so much, he never forgave her for screwing up his plans. And he used to say, "I hate pregnant women. They get big and then they have a baby."
Creep.
So Vera was relegated to a supporting role for one of his best-known works, which was Psycho. Janet Leigh was his star, and it was a big deal because, spoiler, she's killed off in the first 20 minutes of the movie, if you haven't seen Psycho. Leigh has never said anything negative about him, even though they had that whole shower scene they filmed for days on end. But I get the feeling she's one of those people that got along with everybody, and nobody messed with her. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Like Jamie Lee Curtis. Just
like her daughter. Like her daughter. Yeah. She's a good worker. Nobody fucks with her. So, right. The movie was a big success, and he actually took a really small fee in exchange for the profits of the movie. He wound up making $15 million in 1960, which is like $100 million in today's dollars.
Yeah, that's big dough.
So he was rich and famous at this point. He could do whatever he wanted. He was in the mood for a new project and a new blonde when one day he's watching TV and a commercial for a diet soda, and that's where he sees model Tippi Hedren. She was 33 years old at the time and a single mother to her daughter, Melanie Griffith. Melanie would grow up to be the big-time actress Melanie Griffith, and she would then become the mother of Dakota Johnson. So that whole family, super talented. She was making a living as a model in New York City, but she was getting older. She was 33. And she got the call that Hitch wanted to meet her in Los Angeles. He immediately knew she would be perfect for the part of Melanie Daniels in The Birds. Now, Sonia, you would love this part because this is where she gets a huge makeover.
I love makeovers.
She gets an incredible makeover. So he has Edith Head herself design her wardrobe. He buys her a very expensive wardrobe. He helps set up her home. He doesn't want her to date anybody. He starts to really be controlling. And he ordered her to gain weight because he thought she was too skinny. So he sent 2 sacks of potatoes to her home.
I would like someone to order me to put on weight as well.
I would love that. Yes. Yes, please. Can I get a makeover and have to gain weight? Please.
Yes.
He directed her in very expensive screen tests to teach her how to act on camera. And The Birds was based on a Daphne du Maurier story, a short story about an English village overrun by killer birds. The movie was filmed partly in San Francisco and starred Rod Taylor and Jessica Tandy. And it was while filming the movie that Tippi realized that Hitch was sexually obsessed with her.
Scary.
He tried to monitor her movements. He micromanaged her performance. He would not let the crew get close to her. If she talked to other men on the set, he would get jealous. He had her handwriting analyzed.
What? For what?
Just to see what kind of person. He was really into psychoanalysis and psychology, but he never went to therapy. But he always threw it into his movies, and he always tried to psychoanalyze people, but he never went to therapy.
Interesting.
From what I could find out.
Yeah, they filmed some of that in San Francisco, and they filmed some in Bodega Bay, which is just north of here. And I actually went up there and saw I think it's a schoolhouse.
Yes.
In the movie. Yeah, I went up and saw the schoolhouse and stuff like that. It's really cool. Bodega Bay's rad.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's really cool. Yeah. So he also connected her trailer to his trailer, and he had a door that would go between the two of them. He could walk in on her anytime he wanted. And also he's sending her champagne and notes and things like that. He's really pulling the full court press. And one day they were in a limousine together, and he tried to kiss her. and he just kind of jumped on top of her and went for it. And she said no. And he was like, okay. And this was sort of the decline of their relationship. He was really kind of pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
So they get to the point where they're filming a very famous scene in The Birds, which is where the character of Melanie goes to the attic, and the attic is full of birds, and the birds attack Melanie. And I'll never forget the first time I saw this movie. I was very young. I think I was homesick from school. And it was like on in the middle of the afternoon, and it terrified me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the entire time they were filming, she had asked Hitch, how are you going to do this scene? He goes, oh, we're going to use mechanical birds. Don't worry about it. It's going to all be mechanical birds. So she shows up on a Monday, first shooting. She goes into a room, and there's these, and Hitch isn't there. It's just these two guys that work for him, and they have protective gear on them, and they have her stand against a wall, and they just threw real birds at her.
By the way, this would never happen now, right?
Oh, no.
Because
No.
animal rights people would be.
Okay, so it's funny that you mentioned that, because they did have animal control was on set to take care of the birds. They were there to make sure the birds didn't work too hard, that they had their rest, that they ate enough. Nobody was there
to look after her.
for Tippi Hedren.
What the fuck?
And this is her first movie. She doesn't know to say no.
Yeah.
You know, she's not Grace Kelly with like all these roles
Right.
behind her and stuff, like in Rich Boyfriends. Like, she's alone. She doesn't know what she's supposed to do. So this goes on for hours. And what would happen is they would peck at her, blood would smear, her hair would get messed up, and they'd clean her up, and they'd do it again.
God.
It would be 4 hours, and they'd take a lunch break, and 4 hours, and then they put her in a car and send her home. They did this every day for 4 days.
Dear Lord.
On the fifth
That's
day.
insane.
Oh, wait till you hear this.
Ugh.
On the fifth day, he decided that he wanted to change an camera angle once again, and more of like a floor shot. The birds were not pecking at her as much anymore because they were getting tired of it. So they took this string and they tied it to her clothing. So these birds were attached to her and wouldn't be able to fly away. Then they got aggravated. And then these birds really started attacking and pecking at her face. So what you see in the movie is very real. The cuts and
Holy shit.
yeah, it scratched at her eye, and that's the only reason they stopped it. And she basically screamed, and she says, get me the hell out of here. And she goes home, and then she comes back to work on Monday, and she's such a mess. She can't film anything. She's barely able to leave her trailer, and they send the doctor for her. And the doctor's like, we're putting her in the hospital, and she's going to be there for the week. And you're just going to have to film something up. And Hitch freaked out and said, we can't do that. And he always wanted her on set for every single scene, even if she didn't have to be in the scene.
Right.
So he took a week off for her to do this, which is very, very expensive in movies. Yes. But he made millions with Psycho, right? So he had that kind of latitude. Remembering his pranks, Hitch thought it would be hilarious to give a 5-year-old Melanie Griffith a doll. And the doll was made to look like her mother, and it had the green suit, and it had cuts on her face like she does in the movie. And the doll is in a coffin.
No, that's not funny.
No.
That's fucked up.
And Melanie Griffith calls him a motherfucker to this day. And she says, you can quote me. So she had her traumas dealing with him. What a
piece of shit.
Oh, he's so bad. After this, Hitchcock wanted to create Marnie. And Marnie is one of my least favorite Hitchcock movies. It's not very good.
That one has not aged well.
No, it has not.
No.
It's a psychological thriller starring Sean Connery. It was supposed to star Grace Kelly. He loved Grace Kelly. But now she's Princess Grace of Monaco, and she's not allowed to act anymore. So he brings back Tippi. And in 1964, he called this the sexual mystery film. Mm-hmm. And she had already had a weird relationship with him, and she wasn't sure, but she was under contract. What's she going to do? Also, he found out that she was now engaged to her agent.
Oh.
And he got super jealous.
Yeah.
During the filming of the movie, he had her followed when she wasn't on camera. He also, once again, had a dressing room right next to her dressing room. He would just walk in once again whenever he felt like it. This time, though, the one time he went in there that he wanted more than just a performance. He called her into his dressing room and then demanded that she perform a sex act on him. She said no. She said he asked her to touch him, and she said no. And then he tried to grab her, and she basically broke away. She describes it in her book, Tippi, a memoir, that it was a full-on hands-on sexual assault. It was just short of rape, but he really, he fought very hard. And she had to fight him off. And he got very upset. After that, he started referring to her as the girl. So in order to speak to him, she could only speak to him now through his assistants. And he no longer showed her any courtesy on the set. He yelled at her. He berated her. He made fun of her performance.
This is just another example of women just trying to do their jobs.
Right.
And, if you don't do exactly what I want when I want it, then you're a piece of shit and they make your life a living hell.
Exactly.
What a piece of shit. He's awful.
Toxic male behavior, and he was just totally unchecked. So the story of Marnie is about a con woman who steals from her employers and is always on the run. So one day she meets Sean Connery, and she starts to work for his company. She steals from him, and his character's name is Mark. But when Mark catches her, he blackmails her into marrying him. Mm-hmm. And she says she doesn't want to be touched, but her new husband, Mark, rapes her.
Yes.
And then it turns out Marnie's mother was a prostitute, and one of her Johns tried to molest Marnie, so she killed him. So Marnie remembers all of this and then decides to stay with Mark. Evan Hunter was the screenwriter, and he told Hitch he wrote 2 different versions of the script, and one with the rape and one without the rape. And he said, it doesn't make any sense. This man really loves her. He's not going to rape her.
Yeah.
And Hitch said, keep the rape scene in. And he goes, Evan, when he sticks it in her, I want that camera right on her face.
Creepy. That's fucked up.
It's so fucked up. And Sean Connery and Tippi were both really upset about the scene. They didn't think it made any sense. And it was, by all counts, a totally miserable shoot. And a lot of colleagues say that this is when he lost interest in the movie. About halfway through, he just kind of forgot about it. And he didn't really pay attention to the scenes or the set. He's usually very fastidious about everything. And he just completely lost interest in it. And it was not reviewed well.
Yeah, that one's in our box set, and it's the one that I was already that's fine. I don't need to see that again.
No. And I found this review. It's 2016. Richard Brody of The New Yorker wrote, this film is, to put it simple, sick. And it's so because Hitchcock was sick. He suffered all his life from furious sexual desire, suffered from lack of its gratification, suffered from the inability to transform fantasy into reality, and then went ahead and did so virtually by way of his art. So it explains his right.
Yeah.
This was also the end of Tippi's career. He basically blacklisted her. He told people that she was terrible to work with. She was a drug addict. She was late. The crew hated her. He Harvey Weinstein her.
This is some Harvey Weinstein style shit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So after this, I know. So that's 1964. And the quality of his movies really starts to go down. And he releases a few more films. Paul Newman is one of his films, but they only do okay. And they're kind of getting worse and worse in quality. And he's sort of just losing his spirit about it. One film that did do well was a movie called Frenzy. That also included a rape scene. This was the first time he was allowed to shoot nudity, so he really went for it. And the 2 actresses that were supposed to be in the scene completely refused to do it, so he had to use backup people. But by this time, it was a success. But right after this, he got very sick. His health was failing, and he was more famous at this point for being an elder statesman, but not for being the great filmmaker. I mean, The Family Plot, I think it was his last one in 1976. He did give a lot of interviews. Like I said, he was an elder statesman. And most famously, he interviewed with the director, Francois Truffaut. Mm-hmm. They had a 50-hour interview, and Hitchcock agreed to answer 500 questions for him. And that became a best-selling book in 1967, and it's considered the best oeuvre of his work and of his feelings about it. Of course, nothing about Tippi and his other bullshit, but just...
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
In 1980, he was appointed Knight Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. So he's now Sir Alfred Hitchcock. In 79, by the way, just before that, he was at the Academy Awards. He won the Lifetime Achievement Award, but he died of kidney failure March 16th, 1980. Tippi, when she left, by the way, she became an animal rights person and a lover of big cats. For a long time, she and her husband had actual lions living in their house. Full-size animals.
Like in a cage, or like wandered around They wandered around the house?
They lived in the house. On the beds, they swam in the pool. They lived in the house. This is how Melanie Griffith spent her teenage years, like her early teen to teenage years.
Look, I love animals too. But I don't want a lion walking around my house.
No, well,
they will eat you.
Of course. Look, my cats love me, but if they weighed 10 times more than they are, or 100 times more, they would kill me. And they love me, but they're animals. That's the thing. So there is this movie that came out in 1981 called Roar, and it was filmed at Tippi's house, and it was basically it was all about the lions in the house, and supposedly all these crew members were mauled at some point by a lion and sent to the hospital. So all of the maulings are very real that you see. You can get it on fandango.com. I think that's where you can stream it now. I've never seen it, but I hear it's like a batshit crazy movie, but very enjoyable, but it'll mess you up.
That is really, really scary to me.
Yeah.
That you would do that. Like, you can't reason with a lion. It's like, hey, please don't maul me. Down. Bad kitty. Like, they will. Oh, that's scary.
Can you imagine cleaning up after a lion?
No, they don't use a litter box.
Yeah. I mean, all of it's bad. Like a hairball by one of those things.
Oh, it's so scary.
So she's still alive. She is still with us. She wrote her memoirs a few years ago. She is really big on the Me Too movement, and she came out when all those stories were coming out and it said what Hitch had done to her. She has good enough memories of him as a director. She thought he was a brilliant man, and she loved his movies, but she thought it was totally fucked up the way he treated her.
Yeah.
And Melanie Griffith never forgave him. And it gave her a lot of trauma that she then passed on. She felt like she passed on to Melanie.
Sad.
Which is just what happens, though, sometimes, you know?
Yeah. These things happen to you. And then if you don't, I don't know, how do you process it? And then, it's going to affect everything in your life.
Just think about how much was out of her control that he took over. Like her reputation, her ability to find work. I mean, he took it all away from her because she wouldn't sleep with him.
Yeah. I haven't seen, like I said, I didn't see the movies about this sort of thing. There was like 2 that came out like right around each other.
Yeah.
In those movies, do they show like what Alma thought of all of this, or did she know about it? Or
there's the one with Anthony Hopkins, and Helen Mirren plays Alma. And it's very funny to watch because Alma in real life was 4'11". She was a tiny little thing, and Helen Mirren is not tiny.
Yeah.
But they make it seem like, yes, they slept in twin beds, but that she helped him. She was a big part of his success. But they had an arrangement in their marriage. Like they were just going to be with each other and just not have a sexual relationship. I don't know. They kind of made it seem like she had an emotional affair with somebody, but that she always stayed with him.
Yeah.
Towards the end of his life, he was basically a miserable prick. He really just sick and can't do the things he used to do. And you think about it, he's antiquated to everybody else. I mean, in the 70s, you have like Robert Altman and Martin Scorsese, all these different, independent films, and all the films are getting flashier. There's Star Wars, all these things are happening.
Yeah.
And he kind of seems quaint in comparison. A guy who wore a suit and a tie every day to the set. So he felt out of step. And so he's very sad the last few years of his life. But that's our creep today. Alfred Hitchcock.
Good job, Margot. What a creep.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh. What a creep. It will be really hard to watch The Birds again.
It is, but I have to say, I love that movie, and I think she is so breathtaking in it. Like she's that suit she wears, that green suit, and her hair. And Melanie just hops around like Bodega Bay in high heels and a pencil skirt, like gets around like nobody's business. Like we talked about this on Book versus Movie by other podcasts. Like I still enjoy his movies. It's okay to enjoy his movies. I still watch Alfred Hitchcock Presents. It's just that you have to know he had this creepy side to him, and he was imperfect. He's a very imperfect individual.
Yes, to say the least. But good job on that, because I know that there's a ton of information out there, and try to put it all together into one story is hard work. So good job.
I could list all of his pranks, but after a while it just got tedious. Like I'm just like, I wish this man just like got some therapy and stopped pranking people. Like, but
no shit.
But maybe it wouldn't have been what he wouldn't have created what he created. I mean, it's maybe part of that was part of his genius.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Are you ready to hear about someone who's not a creep?
Yes, I am, Sonia.
Okay. So I wanted to pick someone who was kind of making movies and coming up around the same time as Hitchcock. And so I landed on Billy Wilder. And I'm sure you know who Billy Wilder is, but just in case people don't, he is a writer and director who's made some of the best movies ever made. He did Double Indemnity. I hope I pronounced that right. That's what they consider one of the first like film noirs. Mm-hmm. It's so good. Sunset Boulevard, Some Like It Hot, The Apartment, The 7-Year Itch, Ball of Fire, Lost Weekend, Ninochka. Have you ever seen that one? With Ninochka. That movie's funny as shit. It's really, really good.
That's with Greta Garbo, right?
Yes. He's been nominated for the Oscar 21 times, 13 for screenwriting, 8 for direction, and he won Best Director for The Lost Weekend and The Apartment. I love The Apartment.
That is such a great New Year's movie.
It is so good. Mm-hmm. It's with Shirley MacLaine and Jack Lemmon, and Shirley MacLaine is like the cutest thing ever. She's so everybody drink.
She's adorable.
She's adorable. Everybody drink. It's really, really great. I love that movie so much. Anyway, Billy Wilder, Australian born, his mother, grandmother, and stepfather, they all died in the Holocaust.
Oh, Jesus.
Much like Hitchcock, he also did some of those, I don't want to say propaganda movies, but they were movies that they made to kind of educate people in Germany about what happened in the concentration camps. And you said that Hitchcock's didn't get released until like the 80s or something. Billy Wilder also made one called Death Mills. It's really fucked up and hard to watch, but apparently it's really, really well done. And it was actually released. And then he said that like whenever he would come across like Holocaust deniers, he would always respond to them with the question of, where is my mother?
Oh my God, that breaks my heart.
I know. Isn't that so sad?
Oh my God.
His movies, he was never like super political. He said that his sympathies were always with like kind of ordinary people, and he liked to tell stories about ordinary people and the issues that confronted them. But he also kind of has this special place in Hollywood history because he pushed like the censorship boundaries for what is like acceptable. I'm going to put that in quote, acceptable subject matter. So like Some Like It Hot had, cross-dressing. And that whole like last line about like nobody's perfect,
which is one of my favorite exit lines ever for a movie.
Yeah. All of that was like pushing the boundaries of what was appropriate. What were some of there were some other things. It was like, alcoholism, The Lost Weekend, prison camps and Stalag 17, and then prostitution in a movie he did called Irma La Doce in 1963. These are all things that like you just kind of didn't really deal with in movies because of the rating systems. But he did all of that. His movies are on all kinds of best movie lists. They're really amazing. Much like Hitchcock and Truffaut's book, there is a book called Conversations with Wilder, and it's a collection of interviews that were done by Cameron Crowe, very overshadowed by the Truffaut Hitchcock book because Wilder and Cameron Crowe are not Truffaut and Hitchcock. But, he was one of those people that he made these really, really great movies early in his career. And then, as the 70s and 80s came, like he just fell out of fashion, and he didn't really work again, but he He wanted to work. He would come. He had an office on the studio lot, and he would come in like every day at like 9 o'clock and like work on things that never got made. But then lots of different filmmakers would come and see him. He had a constant stream of people that would come and like have lunch with him and things like that to talk to him because he made so many amazing movies. They kind of wanted to pick his brain.
Sure.
By all accounts, seems like a solid dude. He was married in the 30s and they had twins, babies, but then one of the babies died. So sad. And then they divorced shortly after, which is super common when someone loses a baby. And then he met Audrey Young on the set of The Lost Weekend in 1945, and they got married, and they were together until he died. He died in 2002. He lived to be forever, right? He got pneumonia. He was 95.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was buried in Westwood Village Memorial Park, and he's near Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau and Marilyn Monroe. And it was the same day that Milton Berle and Dudley Moore died. Just FYI, that has nothing to do with him.
Wow,
Just
but those are three biggies. Well, one of
I
them,
know.
especially Burl.
Yeah, they. Oh, hey-oh.
Hi-oh, I'm going blue all of a sudden. Look it up, kids, if you don't know what we're talking about. Milton Berle, big.
Yes, very big. So when he passed away and then his wife passed away too, they did like they left in their will like a huge donation to like the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. It was $11 million.
Wow.
I know, pretty big. And they also set up like a trust for a theater group. And I'm trying to find the name of the theater group. Oh, it's just called the Billy Wilder Theater. Anyway. It was known as the Hammer Museum, and then after the donation they changed it to the Billy Wilder Theater. That's why I got confused. Sorry, everybody. Anyway, they're very generous people who put all of that in their will, and just by all accounts, he was like a decent human being who just made amazing movies that spoke to normal people about their normal problems. And movies, they're perfect.
Yeah. And you don't have to be an asshole to be a genius.
Exactly.
Right.
Thank you. See, you put it way better than I did. That's what I was trying to get at.
Or cruder. Yeah.
You don't. I like
better?
your crude version. No, I say better. You don't have to be an asshole to be a genius. And this guy made really great movies, and they're all over the map. It's not like, oh, I just made comedies. Like The Lost Weekend is a drama.
It's depressing as anything,
it's depressing as fuck. The Apartment is like a pretty dark comedy.
Yeah, about suicide.
Yeah. Some Like It Hot is, a flat out comedy. Sunset Boulevard is dark as fuck. Double Indemnity it's naughty. It's a naughty
It's
movie.
sexy.
It's sexy. It's really good. All of these movies are all over the map, and he had such great timing and was so good at casting, and his scripts were always spot on. Seems like a really cool dude.
Well, that's a great choice.
I'm into it. So
yeah.
Billy Wilder, not a creep. I'm happy to report.
So watch some Billy Wilder movies this week if you get a chance, being my point.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong. If you haven't seen The Apartment, I would start with The Apartment. I love The Apartment. And
Some Like It Hot is really hilarious.
Yeah. If you haven't seen that, come on.
Yeah.
Get with it. See Some Like It Hot. And then watch The Apartment. Actually, you can't go wrong with any of these.
We've mentioned a whole bunch of great movies today.
Yeah, add them to your list.
Yeah. So that's the season finale for season 4 of What a Creep, you guys. We'll be back next week with a whole new creep. If you like the sound of our voices, by the way, we co-host a show called Dorking Out, where we dork out about movies from all different eras, and we have so much fun doing that. By the way, I forgot to mention, if you guys want some stickers, send us an email, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. We will get them in the mail to you. It's also a great place to send us suggestions. We also love it, like on social media. Once again, we mentioned before that we have a Facebook page. We have a Facebook group, actually. You should join that. It's a great place to leave us ideas. Also, on Twitter, we're at CreepPod, and we both check our Twitter feed all the time. And the reason that it's at CreepPod is because somebody had What a Creep for 10 years but never used it.
Creep.
If you have ideas and you want to use Twitter, we love it when you use the Annie Potts GIF. We got one and put it there on Twitter. But I say also make sure you email us. That way we won't forget it. And
That's right.
Yeah. And Sonia, where can they find you?
You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on Twitter. And if you want to listen to Dorking Out, it's at dorkingout.com and Dorking Out Show on Twitter as well. Where can people find you, Margot?
You can find me on social media at Brooklyn Fitchick. That's for Twitter and Instagram. I don't check my Facebook page very much there. And I have a blog. It's called brooklynfitchick.com. And I'm putting episodes on there of the different shows I work on. And also talking about the book that I'm writing, which is going to be coming out this year. And I'll talk about it more in a future episode. But I'm super psyched about it. Yay!
I'm super psyched about it.
We all are. So we'll be back next week with a whole new season. And in the meantime, you guys, don't be a creep.
Creep.
Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.